When I stepped out of the airport, then immediately felt like I was stepping into a sauna. Like, it was very humid in El Salvador, especially this part where the airport is. I think it's a little less humid in other parts, but I think I was also just more used to it. And so, very humid, that was awesome. And we hopped in a car, had our couple first days doing stuff. My first companion was from Honduras, and so I could understand him all right. I knew some Spanish before coming in the mission field, and I guess that's something important. You want to learn as much as you can before coming in. I would always study the Book of Mormon in Spanish with my dad because he knows Spanish. Then right after my first changes meeting was something I'll never forget at all, because we stuffed all my bags and things in the back of this pickup truck. And in El Salvador, to get around, they have old crummy buses that they get from the States. And they have these pickup trucks where they put this like metal cage over the back and they throw a tarp over the top. And lots of times they'll charge you $0.25 and you jump in the back and they shove like 30 people on there to get from one town to another. But for this time we just shoved all our luggage on there. We had like 6 missionaries and we all just hopped in the back too and started flying out to my first area. And it was just incredible to see how the houses were and the kind of place it was. And just my house, walking in there, then like the housing is very different than what we have here. My first area was Sopico, and it's the farthest area up north of the mission. It's kind of out there, and it's just kind of a little town, and there are parts of the town where you could go up and you could look down over the town a little bit. You could see it down there, and just kind of made me feel like I was out in the middle of the jungle in like the middle of nowhere. And that is kind of scary starting out. Like, scary being out in your first area, but it was also just so incredible to see the differences there. Like, it always, in the mornings, then I'd kind of be sad and a little scared because you could hear all the El Salvador sounds going by. You can hear the guys with the bikes that are selling bread. Like, they have this huge basket that's set on these like metal things that are welded onto the bike, and they go around honking their horn, just selling bread. And got all the people selling stuff. Tamales, pupusas. It's a lot of fun. But whenever I walked outside, then just amazed. I think in the morning as I sat in there studying, I was just like so scared, very sad. But once I walked outside, saw the cobblestone sort of streets there, and there's a lot of dirt roads too, and just the incredible sort of place it is. It's just so amazing. It's something you don't get, well, here in the States. So this is El Salvador, and the mission is just like a triangle. You've got your map on it. And so my first area was in Opico, up in the top, and then I flew over to Belize. And in El Salvador, then we are blessed to have the temple, El Salvador Temple, and there are a number of stakes. The church is fairly strong there. In lots of areas it's still kind of starting up, but I never served in a branch in El Salvador. They were generally at least wards, kind of small wards, lots of times, but they all had wards. But in Belize, then the church has only been there for about 30 years. And so there are 2 districts, and they still don't have wards or stakes yet. And so there are only branches. There's a branch in Orange Walk, in Coruscant, and there are 2 in Belize City. There's 1 in Belmapon, 1 down in Dangriga, and there's a couple over in Cayo over here. And down south, there still aren't any missionaries yet. Overall in Belize, there are only about 70 missionaries. When I got there were about 30. And so I got to see that growth a little bit. Our mission president focused on that a lot. So yeah, in Belize you get to see things starting out. They're really close to getting stakes though, so the branches are getting pretty strong. But down in like Dangriga, then they only get about like 30 members there. It started about 30 years ago in Belize. In El Salvador, it's been there a little bit longer, but still there's a lot of members there that remember the beginnings of the church in El Salvador, and that's really cool. You get to talk to people who were in like the first branches there in San Salvador, and they have seen it split and grow, and so there's a lot of people that have seen that just in their lifetimes. They've seen the church growing quite a bit, and so it is a rapidly growing sort of a place. El Salvador, like as a nation, has generally been more Catholic, but they do have a lot of evangelicals, and I think that's what they call, and Jehovah's Witness and whatnot. And in Belize too, I think it's generally about like that too. A lot of Jehovah's Witness, and so of course you always get lots of fun stories about like what people think about the church. And I think the favorite one I ever heard was that they heard that as Mormons, then we smoke weed to communicate with Joseph Smith, which is a pretty good one. Generally, you just get the basic idea that we worship Joseph Smith as a god instead of God, and so that's the main thing you want to help people understand, that we do believe in Jesus Christ, and we believe that we need, well, the guidance of God through his prophets as well. One interesting thing that I guess I didn't expect was there are a lot of illiterate people in El Salvador. Like the schools aren't so good. So younger people, usually they can read, and they can't read super well, like they read a little slow, but the old people, generally they can't read, or even if they did read before, then their eyes have usually gone bad and they can't read anymore. And so it's a little harder for them to get a testimony of the Book of Mormon and things. You want to go and read with them, try and get them a tape or whatever, and help them to get those things. And the other main things, you get a lot of people, more in Belize than El Salvador, but both of them a lot. You get a lot of people who do drink a lot. There are a lot of people in Belize that smoke marijuana. And so you want to help them to understand the word of wisdom. And in both countries as well, it's pretty expensive for the people to get married, or it's not too bad. Like in El Salvador, generally if you get a member of the church, then you can get somebody married for like $25 or something, which is a decent amount there. But what's harder though is that it's really hard to get divorced. That costs an awful lot, and so generally they're hesitant to get married. And so most people in both places, they generally live together without getting married, which is really sad. And so that's something you want to prepare for and be able to help the people with. I served in Opico in El Salvador, and then I went to Belize. I was in Orange Walk for 7 months, and I loved that area because I was there for so long, and I got to know it really well. I really loved those people. And then I was in Belmont Pond for 3 months, which was also very cool. Very nice jungly mountains down there. And then I went back to El Salvador after that, and I was in Sonsacate, in La Ponderosa, and lots of very humble people there. And I finished my mission in San Salvador, in La Cima, which seemed super fancy for me at that point, because I had been in a third world country for almost 2 years, but not quite as fancy as the US. In El Salvador, it's a really small country, but they have 6 million people packed in there. And in Belize, it's about the same size, but there are 300,000 people that live there. And so El Salvador, all the houses are packed straight together, just concrete boxes. And they're very poor, but it's a very developed kind of a poor. Like they've been there for a long time. And generally, the families, they all stay in the same house for a couple generations. Like you'll find great-grandma and her children and their children, and they'll all be stuffed in this tiny little house. But in Belize, then there's tons of extra land, and it's generally also really swampy, and so they tend to make these houses on stilts, which are really awesome, kind of ramshackle looking houses. They all look like they're about to fall over, but generally they don't. You also tend to live in a lot of concrete houses in Belize too, but you have a little more space. The weather generally is the same. In both places, all you have is summer and the rainy season. Like you're not getting any winter. There's 2 or 3 days each year where you get a little chilly and you think you might need a jacket. And that's about it. I still managed with a long sleeve shirt though for those couple of days. So that was cool. But you always get these big torrents of rain that come in really fast. But for transportation, then I talked about those trucks. Those are a lot of fun, except I think they're banned now. But they have these super old buses that are very exciting. They're very old, and so sometimes you can kind of see the road going by below you while you're sitting there, which is a little disturbing. But generally you get there, And in El Salvador, really all you ever pay is like a quarter to get anywhere, unless you're going a long ways, and then you might pay like $1. So they give you a different amount of money in El Salvador and in Belize. In El Salvador, they just use the US dollar, but it'll get you a lot more. Like with the people going by and selling like pan dulce and stuff, and you can buy something for 10 cents. That's pretty tasty. But unless you want something from the States, and then it's a little pricey. It's pretty pricey. Then in Belize, then generally it does cost more. In Belize, they use like Belizean dollars, but a Belizean dollar is just half of a US dollar. So it's still in the same units and everything, and you can still buy stuff with a US dollar, and they'll just give you your change in Belizean dollars, which is interesting, but it makes it a lot easier for all the tourism that goes on there. And if you want to buy stuff with your US dollars, it is exactly a half, like it's based on the US dollar. So it looks really cool. I love the Belizean dollar. It's got a nice boat on it. It's very cool. In El Salvador, then, I guess I did see their like national bird a couple times, torogos, which is very cool looking. It has a cool tail. And so you do see some cool wildlife, even though everything is pretty urbanized. I thought it was really interesting that one time a little girl, she asked me if there were woods where I lived in the US. I said, yeah, there are woods. And she said, we don't have any woods. And I was so confused. I had to stop and think about that for a little bit, because she pretty much lived in the woods, like in the jungle. But really there were like houses where she lived, and there were houses for just about as far as you could go. And then there were some cornfields and whatnot. They really weren't just straight jungles or woods in El Salvador, because there are just so many people that live there. But in Belize, then it's all like your classic jungle, like what you would expect out of a jungle. Then that is Belize. On the top northern part, then it's all completely flat, and it's actually below sea level, and so it's all swampy, and it's always very wet, which is why they have to build all their houses on stilts. But down on the southern part, then it's your classic epic jungly mountains, and they're just so cool. I love those mountains. If you ever take the bus ride from Belmopan down to Tangriga, then you're in the bus for like 2 hours, I think, just rolling through these awesome jungly mountains. You can imagine like Nephi wandering through there. It's the same sort of place. In El Salvador, the main thing they have are big volcanoes, and so those are pretty cool. The one I loved a ton was Santa Ana. Santa Ana. It's got this huge like green lake in the bottom, and it is absolutely monstrous. It is so cool. And in Belize, they have a lot of ruins. There aren't so many ruins in El Salvador, just little tiny ones. But in Belize, there are a lot of Mayan ruins, and there's some pretty big ones. It's one of their main tourist attractions, so you want to go to those. And they have a lot of like water stuff you can do, but can't do it. I haven't looked into it. I think the coolest thing I can say about Mayan ruins is that they're really like everywhere in Belize. Like we had this investigator who was a classic like Belizean man. Like he had his dreads, and he smoked marijuana, and didn't want to drop it. But he lived on this little hill in the middle of nowhere. His name was Edward. But he lived on a Mayan ruin. Like apparently his mom, for some reason or other, had pushed this hill over. I think they were going to build a road or something, and they found these Mayan graves, and they found all these pots full of just Mayan artifacts and whatnot that he sold to build his house. And there were still all these bits of pottery, whatnot, all around over there, and just awesome stuff. So that doesn't mean Mayan stuff is like laying out in the streets everywhere, but there is a lot there, and if you search for it, then people know about it too. In Belize, like you do find people that are really hard working there, but it's a very hot place, and they have a lot of hammocks, and it is a nice place to take a nap. Like generally you want to go and do that when you're out tracking. So it's a beautiful place though, and on P-Day, then that is a recommendable thing to do, is to buy your hammock and go sit in that. Very nice. Generally we had nicer houses in Belize, and I think there's more of a range there, because El Salvador, it's very established. They have their concrete houses, though sometimes they do have houses that are just made of aluminum sort of pieces. But in Belize, then they have these little ramshackle houses that are just made of sticks pretty much. But generally we'd have the nicer houses that were a little more stable. And so I think it would have been, I think our first house was like $300, like $600 Belize. I could be wrong. But we had some pretty nice houses. The house in Belmopan was nice. We actually had like a washer, which was quite exciting. For transportation, like in Belize, then generally it'd be like $5 or $6 Belizean to get from like one town to another, whereas in El Salvador it'd be like a quarter generally. And so it was pricier in Belize to get from one place to another. And generally I think the food is a little bit pricier in Belize. So in El Salvador, obviously they have a lot of gangs and whatnot, and you hear a lot about it. And I didn't really have any experience with the gangs until the very end of my mission. And they still didn't bug us that much. But in Belize, like, there are a lot of people from other Latin American countries that go there for safety, because it is a very safe place. The only place that's dangerous at all is Belize City, where it's like the missionaries there, they do have to go in at 8 instead of at 9, because it's a little more frightening. People steal stuff there some. But it's still generally pretty safe. And the good thing about El Salvador is that they're all very religious people. So just walking around with a shirt and tie and a name tag, then you're okay. Generally they won't bug you. And the gangs, they just bugged us once in El Salvador, and they're really just scared of the other gangs and everything. I thought it was really interesting that they bugged us. But they want to see your phone to make sure that you're not calling or texting other gangs, and maybe your camera, make sure you're not taking pictures. And they were talking to the people we were with, saying, oh, they could be spies from the US or something. But we were okay. And so it just made me thankful that I don't have to live in that kind of a situation, that they really are just afraid of everything. Like, if a skinny white guy walks through your midst and you're scared out of your minds, then I think something's wrong. But I didn't have my camera at that time. You're not really supposed to bring your camera around. What's interesting is they have so many immigrants from Latin countries, and so there are a lot of people that speak just only Spanish, and then their kids, they learn English in school, and then they go home and they speak Spanish, and the parents try and speak as much English as they can, and so they end up speaking this kind of Spanglish, where they'll just kind of throw English words into their Spanish, which is very cool, very interesting. And then you also have Mennonites that are wandering through there, which is the strangest thing ever to see. When you're in the town, then you see, the Belizean man going through with his dreads, and you see some Latinos, going by, and then you see Farmer Brown standing there. He's got this pitchfork and overalls, and he's a white guy from Germany. They speak German, which is very interesting. They make all the ice cream and dairy products in Belize, which is very cool. And then the Chinese, they own the place. All the big stores and things, then they're owned by Chinese people, and generally tend to call them chinos, because, well, they're always owned by the Chinese. And generally the computer places are owned by Chinese people. And so some of the missionaries there have tried learning Chinese, try and talk to them more, which is good. And then if you get out more in the boonies, then there are a lot of people that speak Mayan. And generally, in Orange Walk, then the classic people there would always say they spoke English, Spanish, Creole, and Mayan. Where I think generally they only spoke a couple words in Mayan, but very cool. There are just so many things running around there. So potentially, and they also have Garifuna, which is an African language, Garifuna, which is more down in Dangriga down south. So there are just so many cultures, so many things mixing in there, and it's just an incredible place. You meet so many different kinds of people. I don't really know too much about how everything got there. Just, you could probably look that up on Wikipedia. But it used to be a British colony, and they split off a couple of years ago. They still have the Queen on their coins and things. And I guess it's just a safe place, and a lot of people have made their way there just because of that. And it's a really nice place. In El Salvador, then all you have are Salvadoreños, because nobody really wants to move to El Salvador. they've all been there for a really long time. But in Belize, then there are so many different kinds of people that have moved there, that want to move there, and lots of tourism that goes on too. And so you have a lot of different groups. So your main like classic Belizean sort of person are people who have come from Africa, who are like kind of a Jamaican sort of a guy, and lots of them have dreads. They're black guys, and they speak what they call Belizean Creole, which is one step down from like being a different language. So it's pretty much just really bad English, but it's a lot of fun to listen to. Like if you get a good Jamaican accent, like before going out, that's good prep. But it's a little bit different, so it's really cool. I never got very good at imitating it, because most of my areas I spoke English and Spanish, did more Spanish. But they'd always say like, "Where to go on, boy?" It's like, I know, what's up? They always say boy instead of boy, and gyal. And they'll say simple, like for stupid, simple gyal. So it's really cool. I have other companions that got super good at Creole, that could imitate it perfectly. Maybe wish I could have spent more time on it, but maybe I was focused in more important things. The main thing you'll always get fed are rice and beans, which I guess is kind of what you get anywhere else in Latin America. But they put coconut milk in it. They put coconut milk in everything, because there's tons of coconuts in Belize. And really is pretty good. I guess lots of times you get very generic rice and beans, which is not so good. But do their classic place of rice and beans and potato salad and fried plantains. And generally that was a pretty happy thing. Eat it quite a bit. And then you go out and they have these little fast food stands. You don't have, like in El Salvador, you'll find like US fast food. You'll find McDonald's and Burger King and Pizza Hut and everything. And the really fancy people go there. You gotta have money to go to fast food. And so those are classic places. But in Belize, then none of that's made it there, just because there aren't enough people really to buy it. It'd be hard to find a central place where there are enough people for them to get a good earning off of it. And so they have all this like Belizean fast food, which they have fried jacks, which are marvelous. They fry tortillas in oil, and it's pretty much just a fried burrito. They put like put beans and cheese and whatnot in there, and chicken. Those are fabulous. And just basic tortillas. They do a lot of tacos, especially in Orange Walk, and they have some marvelous little tacos. And just there's a decent amount of that kind of, I guess, Mexican food that comes just right across from the border down there. They do like spices in Belize. They throw a lot of habanero on stuff, and they have the sauce that like Marie Sharp's, and generally I just put like one little drop on each different part of my food. If you got 2 drops, then it was getting a little too spicy for me, which I am kind of a gringo, so but they pile that stuff on there. They love their spicy foods. The most exciting thing I ate there was probably cowfoot soup, which I got that in Belize and in El Salvador. They kind of have a different version of it, where they just cook it for a really long time, so you can't eat it. Maybe not the best thing ever, but I think it was pretty good. They have some good spices in there, good seasonings, so that was tasty. And they also have something which is called like black soup, or relleno, or something like that, where it really is just black, and it's just kind of a bowl of mystery meat. Because I think they stuff hamburger in a chicken and kind of like roast it or boil it or something like that. And they put some like hard-boiled eggs in there too, so you really don't know what's in there or what kind of meat you're eating. And which is true when you go to the Chinese restaurants too. You don't really know what kind of meat you're getting. My first companion, he told me, if the beef burger costs less than the chicken burger, then don't buy the beef burger, because beef costs more than chicken, so you're not getting beef. So be careful of that. That's a little frightening. And so sometimes I think they'll get the dogs in there, whatever. I think sometimes it may be beef, but can be careful. But yeah, the black soup was pretty exciting. Belize is a little close to the States in the kind of stuff that you can get and kind of the price that it's at. Because in El Salvador there are certain things from the States, just like normal flour or like baking soda, which is kind of harder to find, just because you've got to be specialized in that if you're actually going to do anything with that, because nobody actually has an oven. And but yeah, generally you can get most things the same in Belize and El Salvador. You can always find peanut butter. And El Salvador, it's pretty pricey, but in Belize they really love coconuts, and so my favorite little treat there were empanadas de coco, or they call it like coconut crust, I think, in English. There was this lady in Belmopan that made these just enormous ones that were just so good, where they just had this this bready outside thing, and they filled it with kind of like candied cocoa sort of stuff, and those were pretty marvelous. I think what's interesting with both places are all the street vendors, and so in El Salvador you get a lot more of those, and they're always in different points of the day. Like you get, like I said, all the people selling bread in the mornings for your breakfast, which are these little rolls, and you get a lot of people selling quesadillas, which aren't our kind of quesadillas. It's some kind of bread, which is fabulous. It's so good, so much better than a normal quesadilla. But those are really good. And you get people who they sell all their fruits and vegetables all along the streets, which in El Salvador, that's really cool. All the women, they carry stuff on their heads. So you've got these enormous baskets full of fruits and vegetables and stuff. They've got to be really buff. But they sell that all around. And they always, shout out what they've got. Pupusas, tamales. And in Belize, then they run around and they sell stuff too, generally. Well, I guess my favorite part of the day was when you got to the ice cream sellers in El Salvador. Then they make these ice creams, like homemade ice creams, and out of just fruits and things. And those are fabulous. You get a little one of those for $0.25. And you get the people selling pan dulce, just sweet, desserty bread sort of stuff, which is pretty good. And in Belize as well, then people go around and they sell their desserts and things just on the streets. So if you can time things right, then you can get some good stuff. And sometimes I think we were looking a little bit too much for the food while we were walking around. Sometimes it was hard to track them down. We didn't know where they were. In Belize, then you have lots of different people from different countries. Like you have a lot of people that are from El Salvador and who have come pretty recently and speak just like that. Like half of my area in Belmopan were Salvadoreños, and they just spoke like Salvadoreños. But in Orange Walk, then there were a lot of people from Guatemala, and so they spoke a little bit differently. I couldn't use the same kind of slang that they use in El Salvador. And there are certain words that they use differently, like just different words for cool. And like in El Salvador, they use the word chivo for cool, something that's cool. And that means young goat in normal Spanish. And I believe it means gay in Peru, so you gotta be careful about that. And just there are other little words that aren't bad words, but just get used in El Salvador. Generally, people will have fun telling you about what the slang is in El Salvador. But in Belize, then you get the people that are fresh from their countries, from Honduras or El Salvador or Guatemala, that have their way of speaking. And you also get all the people that have grown up in Belize, and they speak kind of more of a gringo Spanish, which is easier to understand, but a little simpler lots of times. And they show English words in there too, which is really cool. But lots of times with the gringo Spanish, then they won't really roll their R's or click their R's, like say puerta instead of puerta. And so generally I tried to avoid doing that, just to try and get better Spanish. But it makes things easier to understand, I guess. Got everything on the list and was okay. Like I did need the boots, so you should probably get those, because the rain's pretty intense in El Salvador and in Belize. It doesn't come down for very long, but it comes down hard. Probably would have liked to have had a better raincoat, but I didn't really have a raincoat. That would have been good. And yeah, the boots. I don't think you even really need a suit coat anymore. I could be wrong. I think they said you don't need that anymore. We only used it for meetings, and it wasn't very fun to wear a suit coat because it never gets cold in El Salvador or in Belize, daytime or nighttime. So don't really need blankets either. Well, the dogs are very gross in El Salvador. They call them chuchos. They don't really say perro. And so yeah, those are a little scary. I ran into a couple of tarantulas in our houses. Generally didn't really see them on the streets. I think all the best bugs and things that I saw were always in our house. I never found them anywhere else. But found some cool bugs. When I came back to El Salvador, to La Ponderosa, then I was training an elder named Elder Smith. He was my favorite companion. He was so cool. And well, we saw some ants that are wandering back behind a shed for a while. And so we moved it once to see what was back there, and we saw like the wall like covered with ants, all these ants. And so we moved it back and we went and we bought some Raid, and we came back and pulled it open. I think one of us had it ready to pull it and the other one sprayed, and just took them all out, and we were feeling pretty good about ourselves. And I wandered off. Elder Smith was kind of spraying a little bit more, and he looked at his bed, and there's like a plastic thing covering the bottom, like the, I don't know what you call that, but the bottom part of the bed. And there was an entire ant colony in there. Like, it wasn't on the wall like we thought. There was just a huge black mass in there. And so I went and got a pocket knife, and like we pulled the top one off, the top part of the bed, and we slit the plastic all the way down and on the sides a little bit. And I flipped it over, and Elder Smith just went ham. Just destroyed all of them. There were so many ants. It was so gross. And those were like biting ants too. It was incredible that Elder Smith never got bit once sleeping in that bed, because that was an enormous amount of ants. I saw 2 tarantulas in my first house, No Pico. That was such a cool house, by the way. It was very close to nature. It was nice. And Beaumont, there was a time where I was sitting in one of our nicer houses and just talking to my companion. He was sitting in front of me, and I said tarantula, just kind of wander behind him. And it was just chilling. It was just kind of cruising there, just walking along normal. So it was just kind of, It was very interesting. I actually took a couple videos of it. It was a pretty calm little spider, though. Generally, I don't think the tarantulas do much to you. They're just very exciting. That one was probably about that big. I think the biggest one, yeah, generally pretty about there. Just want to talk a little bit about a Mur that we were looking for some investigators, and he came out of his house and he kind of helped us find the investigators. Like, it was a referral we had gotten, and they weren't home, but as we were walking back, then a Mur, he came out of his house again and was pretty much just waiting for us. Where he was your classic, like, golden investigator that you could find. And we started talking to him, and we set up an appointment. And when we came back, he told us that he had read the pamphlet 3 times. And I didn't believe it in the slightest. Because most people in El Salvador and Belize, they don't like to read, and a lot of them can't even read. So you hardly ever found anybody that actually read the whole pamphlet. Generally, if you ask someone if they've read the pamphlet, they will say yes. But that means they've read like the first paragraph. That qualifies as reading it, like, because they read from it. So almost the same thing. But he really did read that stuff quite a bit. He went through all of it, and he pretty much taught us the lessons. And he had been in some bad stuff before, and so it was kind of hard for him to make that change, start going to church. It was a strange thing for him, because he wasn't really in that kind of bad lifestyle anymore. But it was just so strange for him to dress up and go to church. But he just felt so good about it. He really did feel the Spirit and was able to recognize promptings and follow them. And it was amazing to see that change his life. Like, he was guided to be able to find a job when he didn't have one, and be able to make it through. And after like a month or 2, he told us he was feeling like some hard trials were coming. He was feeling kind of bad. Something was going to happen. And we told him that things would be okay, that he'd be all right. And a few days later, then he got arrested. He got put in jail, and for false charges. And he stayed in there for a long time. I managed to visit him like a couple months later. It was kind of hard to get over there, It was a ways away. And he told us that he'd been doing okay. He was pretty happy. He'd been reading the scriptures with his inmates, and praying with his inmates and reading the scriptures. And it's just so amazing. You find people that are just so incredible on your mission, that just feel the Spirit so easily and follow it. And so I love those people a lot. Me and Elder Smith in La Ponderosa, my second to last area, we had an investigator named Alfredo, and he was a great guy. He had actually been hit by a car a couple weeks ago, and he couldn't walk very well. His foot was swelled up really huge. It was kind of frightening. But we had somebody who would help him get to church. And I think he made it to church by himself somehow a couple of times. He was pretty dedicated, and he did commit to be baptized. He had a problem with high blood pressure, and exactly a week before his baptismal date, he actually went blind. Like, I guess something happened with his blood pressure where it went way up, and when he woke up in the morning, he really couldn't see. And when we went by, I think that day, then we went by, and he was stumbling around, and he asked us for help. And we helped him get to the hospital. I was there with him. It was close to Christmas, so we actually sang some hymns in the hospital. That was one of my favorite things, being with Elder Smith, was that we could harmonize things really well. That was a lot of fun. It took him like a week to get back out of the hospital and to be a little better, but he still couldn't see it all. And so we went over there with a member and talked to him how he was feeling, like how things were going. And he was pretty down. It was pretty hard. It's hard to lose your sight. So we talked to him about his baptism, and he still decided to do it. He still wanted to follow that example. It was hard for him thinking about it at first, because he wanted to be able to see his baptism, but he did commit to do that. He did it the next day, the day that we had originally planned, and it was such an amazing thing. And slowly after that, his eyes did start to get better. He eventually ended up going to Guatemala or someplace to try and get some sort of operation done on his eye. But even before that happened, then his eyes did start getting better. And he went up and gave his testimony in sacrament meeting, like the month after getting baptized, and just gave this absolutely incredible testimony about how he had lost his sight, how he said that the devil had taken his sight from him, and how God had been giving it back, that he had blessed him so much from being baptized. And I love that man so much. And there are so many people down in El Salvador and in Belize that I love so much. And I think that's the greatest thing about being a missionary, wherever it is that you do go, is that you get to develop that kind of love for people and be able to see how much God loves them, and to see them change and gain so much more light in their lives. And it's just incredible. That's why we go out and do this. In Orange Walk, there's a great family, the Novello family, that the son, then he's actually the branch president there right now, and the dad, he when we were there, then he was keeping going to church pretty steadily at that point, but it had taken him a long time to become a member. It had been hard, because he actually had a bar with his name on it. Like, he did drink a lot, and he was amazing at pool, and so that was a hard thing to leave behind as well. But there was one day where his son, the branch president, he gave his testimony in sacrament meeting, and he just talked about how grateful he was that his dad and his mom were there with him in church, and I really wanted them to be there with him, because neither of them were members yet. And hearing that testimony, then the dad, he decided to join the church. He said that I want to be with my son. well, the next time we went by his house, he told us, I want to be baptized. I'm going to be baptized this day, and set it up. And he did it. And he's made so many changes. He's such an incredible guy. He went to the priesthood session of General Conference after that. And after going to that, he told us, I've got to go start visiting people with you guys. I've got to start preaching the gospel. And he had just so much power because he knew how to talk there in Belize and speak to Creole and be able to really communicate. Like, I know how it is to live with no, I can't even imitate that voice, but with that life, with drinking and everything. And he helped so many people out just with that kind of testimony, because he changed his life around just so much. But I think the only extreme weather you really get in either place is rain, because otherwise it's just hot and humid. And in Belize, I think it was especially exciting because lots of times it'd come in without a lot of warning. Like when you hear the rain coming, you kind of book it. There's one time you could actually hear it coming, like, and we were talking with somebody at their door, so we were like, let us in. And so that was pretty exciting. But generally the only really exciting thing that happened was we would get really drenched. Well, I already talked about cowfoot soup, and that was pretty exciting, a little strange meat. Also ate pigfoot once, which was actually pretty good. There's just not a lot of meat in there to dig out, mostly just fat. So that was exciting. Well, one thing they always do there is just the, like, snapping. Just like, it's just, I don't know, when something's awesome, then you do that. Which took me pretty much my whole mission to be able to do that. So never actually got to use that skill. Like, overall mission is a big trial. There's lots of things that come at you. And so you always have trouble with companions because you're not the same people. And so that really is an incredible learning experience. To be able to learn from those kind of companions and be able to learn how to be more patient with people that aren't the same as you. And also with all the people you interact with, because people in El Salvador and Belize, they do have a very different culture. And so you get to learn a lot from that and enjoy a lot from that. Like, El Salvador people will quite literally give you the shirt off their back. And if you ask them about like a food or something, then, hey, what are you eating there? It's like, hey, you want some? It's like, well, okay. They'll just give it to you, which is incredible because they don't have much. I think overall, the greatest lesson I learned was just patience overall. That mission is a trial. It is something hard. But you experience so many incredible things, and you know that all good things come in the Lord's timing, and they are worth so much more when you wait for them. So being able to go through times that are hard and times when nobody really wants to listen to you, then you get a lot of patience, and you can be happy knowing that God's happy with who you are, who you're becoming, and what you're doing there. I think what's pretty dangerous in general is just the transportation overall. There's lots of different kinds of things go on. Like they have those pickup trucks that just have the metal like barring like hooked up on the sides, they throw a tarp over the top and stuff, like 30 people in the back. And coming out of Opico, it's going on a downhill and they just floor it. You're just flying down that thing, and you know in Opico there's a lot of cows, so I always thought if a cow just walks right in front of this car, then we're done. Like there's no way you're getting out of that because the brakes don't work very well on those things. So those things are exciting. And a lot of the little vehicles they use as taxis, then they've just got these little wheels, and you know they don't really have the same kind of security like we have in the States. A lot of their water, like the plumbing sort of stuff, then they just have tubes from the house to kind of stick out into the street, and they have these like trenches where all the water goes and it flows down to like a river or wherever. And lots of times, I guess sometimes they do like cover most of it in concrete, but then they have the holes where they don't really cover them with anything, so you can just fall right down into those. One of my companions almost did fall in because there was like a blackout, and we were standing right next to it. He just backed up a little bit, just went whew. But I'm not sure how he managed it. Somehow he grabbed onto something and didn't completely destroy himself. But those are pretty cool. in my last area in La Cima than I was in San Salvador. And so that's a little scary of a place. Except La Cima is very calm. Like like all the housing developments, they have guards out in front of them, and the guards have these enormous guns. And that's always very exciting. Like the fast food places, you'll see this huge guard in front of it with this enormous gun. Generally, they'll open the door for you because they're really not doing anything there. But down in the main part of the city, like we were more in the rich part than the main part of the city, then that's kind of a scary place. Like we had the elders there call us up and say like, so we're hearing gunshots pretty much all day now. Like, what should we do about that? Like, well, we'll call President and ask him about that. So, but I never heard a single gunshot on my mission. Never really had any problems. And so I was very blessed. And overall, as a missionary, you are very blessed. Those missionaries, they were in Santa Anita, and they actually had a guy who was killed out in front of their house. So President Hinckley told him, you should probably find a new house. But nothing ever passed. Nothing bad ever happened to him. And so generally they were protected. They had to go home a little earlier than the rest of us. But as a missionary, you are very protected. I never heard of anything bad happening between the missionaries and the gangs, except for just heard about some gang members bugged some missionaries at some point, and I guess members of another gang came up to the missionaries after that and said, don't worry, we took care of those other guys. Which is a little frightening, but yeah, you're protected. They do respect the missionaries. Well, it's going to be just a fabulous experience. That these two countries are so completely different, but they're both absolutely amazing. They have so many different cultures, and just the differences between those places and where we live now are just so incredible. They're so completely different. And I'm so grateful for the blessing it was to be able to go there and be able to experience those things. I wish I was still there. I've only been home for a couple months. But I love missionary work. I love the kind of people we get to meet and the places we get to go. The incredible jungles in Belize and the epic jungles of El Salvador. I wish you the best of luck, and I know that these will be the most incredible 2 years of your life. And they will be difficult. They will be very difficult. But that just makes them so much better. The kind of highs that you get when you see people make those kind of changes in their lives and accept the gospel, then that is totally worth any trial that you go through to be able to get there and be able to reach those people and be able to get them the gospel. Because this is why we're here on earth and why God has sent you to this place.